Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong will address Singaporeans tomorrow to give an update on the Covid-19 pandemic. World number one Ashleigh Barty announces her retirement from tennis to chase other dreams. And what is it like to love someone with schizophrenia? Margaret Ong shares how her husband's diagnosis affected her life and his. Good evening, you're watching The Big Story with me, Hairianto Diman. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel so you will not miss a single episode. Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong will be addressing the nation tomorrow on Singapore's COVID-19 situation. Posting on Facebook, Mr. Lee says our COVID-19 situation has been improving with the Omicron wave subsiding. Singaporeans are gradually learning to live with the virus. I will speak on our situation and next steps in a live broadcast at 11 a.m. tomorrow. You can watch the Prime Minister's address on the Straits Times' website and YouTube as well as Facebook channels. Also posting on Facebook, Health Minister Ong Ye Kung says it's time for Singapore and Malaysia to work towards fully resuming air and land travel for the vaccinated. Mr. Ong is currently in Kuala Lumpur, where he met his Malaysian counterpart Khairi Jamaluddin, and both ministers agreed Singapore and Malaysia enjoy excellent and long-standing bilateral relations with many linkages and ties that have been disrupted by the pandemic. But now that the COVID-19 situation has stabilized and is improving, the two neighbors should work towards the full resumption of travel. In a rare move by a professional athlete in any sport, top-ranked women's tennis player Ashleigh Barty has retired at just 25 years old. She explains her decision in an emotional interview posted on her Instagram account.
It's the first time I've actually said it out loud, and yeah, it's hard to say, but I'm so happy and I'm so ready, and I just know at the moment in my heart for me as a person, this is right. There was a perspective shift in me in this second phase of my career that my happiness wasn't dependent on the results. And success for me is knowing that I've given absolutely everything I can. I'm fulfilled, I'm happy, and I know how much work it takes to bring the best out of yourself. And I've said it to my team multiple times. It's just I don't have that in me anymore. I don't have the physical drive, the emotional want, and kind of everything it takes to challenge yourself at the very top of the level anymore. And I think I just know that I'm absolutely, I am spent.
Barty leaves tennis with sterling credentials, having won 3 major titles on different surfaces. The most recent was 2 months ago when she became the first Australian to win her home Grand Slam event in 44 years. And her current reign as world number one is the 4th longest streak in the history of the WTA Tour. With more is Rohit Brijnath, Assistant Sports Editor at the Straits Times. Rohit, your thoughts on Barty's retirement? She's only 25, a 3-time Grand Slam champion and the current world number one.
So I think basically everybody got taken by surprise. I think I spoke to people across the world who are involved in tennis, who work in tennis, and they were surprised. And yet, I think part of the surprise is to do with the fact that, look, we're used to, a world now where, athletes just keep going on and on. You have Rafa Nadal, who's playing brilliant tennis at 35. You have Tom Brady, who is making a comeback at 44. Well, he didn't really go away. And so you're wondering, why is this woman who is 25 walking away from the game? But I think there are many levels to this. At one point, I think it's a very brave thing. I think she says, for instance, that she has other dreams. that's actually quite a beautiful thing to see a human being as more than a tennis player, and she wants to go and discover other parts of herself. She is actually quite a versatile person. She started playing tennis. She found it too much. She left tennis. She started playing competitive cricket. She plays golf very well. And now, yeah, she's decided to walk away. And of course, it'll be very scary for her because retirement is incredibly scary because tennis is really the one thing that she does better than anything else in the world and does better than anyone else in the world. And now to give that up and try something else, and obviously, you're going to dream of being on center court again. You're going to miss the applause. You're going to miss some of that stuff. But I think, again, as I say, I think it's brave because athletes don't walk away because they're seduced by the money, they're seduced by the crowds. But I think, this is something she really wants to do. And in a way, I must say, I really applaud her for doing it. I'm going to miss her. But I think it's an amazing decision to make and something to think about.
So, Rohit, building on what you've just said, what does her decision say about the motivations of a professional athlete? So on the one hand, there's Barty, who's happy with her success and content to retire at her peak. And then on the other hand, there are many top players still competing. You mentioned, Rafa, despite titleless streaks. We're talking here like the Williams sisters and even Federer himself.
I mean, I think that's the great thing about sport is that I think it's a very individual thing, and people, are different voices beckon people. Some people feel they can go on and they just love the game so much they want to keep going. And some people feel, okay, no, I've really achieved what I wanted. I mean, Barty said that her one big dream was to win Wimbledon, and she did that last year. And then, of course, this year it was a sort of icing on the cake when she won the Australian Open, and maybe she feels that's it. We feel sometimes that, oh, you must keep playing and, you will earn so much money and, you'll be so famous. But maybe for some people, there is a life beyond that. And that is something that she has given us to think about. And that's very interesting, I think.
And Rohit, what does Barty's departure mean for tennis then, to lose a player that is so well loved? You said yourself that you are going to miss her on the courts.
Yeah, I'm going to miss her because I think that, the athletes come and go, and some we miss more than others. And I think I'm going to miss her a lot for two reasons. One is she played the game very differently from everybody else. I think tennis in some senses can be a little bit boring because players just stand at the back and hammer the ball at each other in these long attritional rallies. Of course, it's skillful, but it's one-dimensional. But she had many dimensions. She had the most beautiful slice you'll ever see. She had brilliant mechanics because she wasn't very tall. She's only 1.66, but she had a very good serve. She came to the net. I mean, there's so many things she could do with the ball. And that was really interesting because, she broke other players' rhythms. And that was something really nice to watch. I think it's very important for the game that players come along to tell young people there are different ways to win. There's not just one way to win. And I think she did that. That's first. But the second thing about her was that she was probably one of the most unpretentious athletes that I've ever seen. She was a very collected person. There was no conceit to her. She was very humble, very normal, and a lot of people were attracted to her because of that, because there was something about her manner which was really, really lovely. And I think those two things, I think the game will really, really miss her.
Rohit, thank you so much for your perspectives. Rohit Brijnath there as the Assistant Sports Editor. Chinese investigators have found one of the two black boxes belonging to the China Eastern plane that crashed on Monday. According to the lead investigator, the box was badly damaged, and it's unclear at this stage if this is the box that contains the flight data or audio recordings. Meanwhile, bad weather has hampered the work of emergency crew at the crash site. Operations came to a stop this morning after officials warned that heavy rain increases the risk of landslides in the mountainous area. The wet weather is expected to continue for the rest of the week. Also today, relatives of those on board were seen arriving at the village nearest to the crash site. The plane carrying 123 passengers and 9 crew was en route from Kunming to Guangzhou when it suddenly plunged from cruising altitude and crashed. China correspondent Elizabeth Law is near the crash site and sent us this update.
Now we're here at the border between Guangdong and Guangxi. as you can see, it's raining very heavily, and this is exactly the same as what it is in Singapore after it's been raining for about 5 days. So it's wet, it's miserable. And also, what we've understand now from Chinese media is that families have been moved towards Teng County, where they are closer to the crash sites. But we don't have actually sight of them because authorities have increased the cordon area, and media have very, very little access towards the family members, and reasonably, of course, to give them space in what has happened. Authorities have not used the words completely perish or fatalities yet, but it is them not using the words that have actually also been very telling. I suppose this is because we are still in the important 72-hour period immediately following a crash, which is why they don't want to prematurely declare anything. That's number one. But I think from what we've heard from officials, and also yesterday at the Foreign Ministry briefing, spokesman Wang Wen wore a completely black tie, which actually gives us an indication of what has happened.
Also in the news, Singapore's core consumer prices rose last month, but not by as much as economists expected. Core inflation, which includes food and energy prices, fell to 2.2% in February versus expectations of a rise to 2.6%. But overall inflation increased to 4.3% due mainly to a jump in car prices. Now, speaking of car prices, COE premiums rose across all categories in the latest tender, except for motorcycles, which dipped after new measures were introduced last week. The open category, which usually ends up for bigger cars, was more expensive than the previous bid 2 weeks ago at $99,010. Meanwhile, petrol prices are back in the $3 territory 1 week after they eased. The posted prices for the most popular 95-octane fuel are above $3 across brands except SPC, which is at $2.98. For those looking to switch to electric cars, not quite a reprieve as well, with electricity tariffs also rising. Senior transport correspondent Christopher Tan tells us if it's a grim outlook for drivers here.
There seems to be no good news on the horizon for motorists. If you're a driver, if you own a car, or if you're thinking about buying a car, I think some relief or some reprieve can be expected maybe 2 years down the road. In 2024, the COE supply is expected to come back. And with a bigger supply, usually premiums will soften. And for oil, I think, if we see an end to the crisis in Russia and Ukraine, and then if the supply chain gets back up to speed, we could, see a stabilization of oil prices. In Singapore, we are now at the moment promoting cycling, we are promoting walking. These two are not dependent on oil, and if you haven't already considered taking up cycling, maybe it's a good time to do so now.
President Halimah Yacob has approved the drawing of $6 billion from past reserves to continue supporting Singapore's Covid-19 public health spending. Announcing her approval of the government's budget on Facebook, Madam Halimah says she had consulted the Council of Presidential Advisers before giving her assent to the supply bill, which then paves the way for the bill to become law. In this week's Living Well, what is it like to love someone with schizophrenia? It's a psychotic mental illness that affects how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. People with schizophrenia may develop hallucinations or delusions of being persecuted. And in Singapore, a study by the Institute of Mental Health found that it was the least recognized of 5 illnesses, including dementia, alcohol abuse, major depressive disorder, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. One common misconception is that schizophrenia causes a split personality. The truth is, the split refers not to multiple personalities, but to a split from reality. Looking after someone with schizophrenia can be a roller coaster ride of emotional ups and downs. Our guest, Margaret Ong, has written a book about her experiences titled One Husband, Two Men. Margaret is now here with me. Welcome to the show, Margaret. Margaret, what is it like to support someone with schizophrenia? In this case, your own husband.
Well, good afternoon, Haryanto. Well, there are many challenges, but I'll focus on three areas. One is really learning to accept the change in him and the adjustment that we as a family have to make. Two is instilling hope when the situation screams otherwise. And thirdly, juggling between a wife and a caregiver role.
Having said that, Margaret, does sticking to a routine help both, the caregiver like yourself as well as the patient?
Routine helps, but routine shouldn't just be about caregiving or managing medication and all that. There is this relationship that is important to be maintained with the loved one. So for me, it's important that I separate the person from the illness. I love my husband while I hate the illness. And secondly, I think I choose to engage my husband and do stuff with him when he's most alert and present. Flow with him, and I leave him his own space when he's not himself.
Margaret, if you could share with us, in the event when your husband has an episode or a relapse, how do you manage that situation?
Well, I give an example. My husband, the sign that I see is when he's restless. He would drive his car and remain uncontactable for 2 to 5 hours. What I would do is I would remain calm because it is a pattern that I saw in him. So what I would do is I'll pray, remain calm until he comes home. I will not nag at him. And what I will do during this time, because this pattern will continue 3 to 10 days consecutively, so I will increase the dosage of his medicine until he stabilizes.
And just to round up our discussion today, Margaret, what advice would you give to caregivers, like yourself and others out there, so that to prevent any sort of burnout or stress from caring for other patients?
Well, maintain close connection with the relationships that you establish. For me, it really provides normalcy. Secondly, build strong spiritual faith, because with that, I have less fear and I have peace of mind. Thirdly, when your loved one is in recovery, enjoy him or her. Do fun stuff with her, because caregiving is not about just managing the medication and the physical care. It's beyond that. It's trying to humanize the whole caregiving and be as normal as possible.
Margaret, thank you so much for the sharing. Margaret Ong there, author of One Husband, Two Men. You can read more about Margaret's experiences as a caregiver to her husband. The article by my colleague Akshita Nanda is online at str.sg/livingwell. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Haryanto Diman. See you tomorrow for more stories on The Big Story.